What am I gonna do? I have bad grades for every test in this class, and this is the only class I have a bad grade in. This project is so frustrating. This is a math class, not an LA class. And I don't even like to read. I don't like baseball. Why did I even pick this book? Wait, if I don't like baseball, how about I play some and then I'll want to do the project? All right, guys, I'm an official MLB baseball player. About to show you what I'm made of. See that can right there? Here, let's put it in a better spot. See this can right here? This little Croy? More like about to destroy. They ain't ready for what's coming. Can you see that can okay? Oh, you won't in a second. You gotta get warmed up, you know what I mean? That was my warm-up throw. We call this one the whirlwind. Man, I thought that was the one. I can't do it anymore, guys. Oh my gosh, I hit it, guys!
I'm a piece of worthless garbage.
Moneyball. It's a book about sabermetrics, or in other words, the use of mathematics and statistics to analyze the game of baseball and its players. Now, after reading this book, I realized it's not really about the equations, it's really about the vocab. And so what I've done for you is I've made vocab sheets for you to look at in class while you watch this video. And they should relate to the definitions in our textbook and in Moneyball. So before I get into the mathematical and statistical part of this novel, I want to give some context and briefly explain the plot so you understand what's going on.
So the book takes place in the early 2000s, and we follow the story of Billy Beane, who was a very talented high school baseball player. And people from the minor and major leagues came to watch him because he was so talented. Eventually, they offered to sign him for the Mets, and obviously he took that deal. Once he played for the Mets, he started to lose his talent, mainly because he was overshadowed by his teammates and he became easily rattled. It was hard for him to keep up with everyone else, and so he eventually decided to switch over to the Oakland A's. He decided to become a talent scout for a while, and then he eventually rose to become the general manager of the Oakland A's.
And so Billy Beane and his assistant Paul De Podesta wanted to use a system that found unknown, valuable, and affordable players. And so the use of sabermetrics revolutionized the idea of baseball and how to pick their teams. And this relates to my first comparison to our textbook in chapter 4 when we designed studies. And so in the first chapter, How to Find a Ball Player, we are introduced to this character named Grady Fuson, who was the top trained scout of the Oakland A's. And Paul De Podesta, he looked at the specific stats of the ball players. He didn't look at the initial observations like Grady Fuson. And these initial observations include like number of home runs, number of bats scored, and the velocity or speed of the baseball. And the quote on page 18 says, "Thirdly but not lastly, there was the bias toward what people saw with their own eyes or thought they had seen. The human mind played tricks on itself when it relied exclusively on what it saw, and every trick it played was a financial opportunity for someone who saw through the illusion to the reality." And so this quote can be related to our textbook because there are different types of bias that can mess up your experiment or your study. And an example of bias that this book mentions is the story of David Beck.
Now, David Beck was a very talented pitcher, but the way he threw the ball was what put him so low on the charts. He almost looked double-jointed or possibly crippled, to the point where his arm looked backwards as he threw the ball. This put him lower on the charts and made no one interested in drafting him onto their team.
However, Billy Beane signed him on the team anyway, mainly because of the stats he found on Paul's computer. And people were all like, "Why'd you sign him onto the team? Have you heard about this guy? Have you heard how he throws?" He's gonna lose all our games. But they weren't looking at it from the same point of view as Billy was. And to top it all off, David Beck got on the team and he won the Arizona Rookie League, struck out 32 batters, had 18 innings in relief, and had an earned run average of an even 1. Now, if we were to relate this to our textbook, our population in Moneyball is all of the college baseball players and all of the high school baseball players that the major and minor leagues are interested in. And our census, which is Paul De Podesta's computer, has all the statistical information of all the individual players. Now, when we're talking about baseball, I see it, we have two samples. So first we have a cluster sample and then we have a final sample. The cluster sample consists of clusters of different colleges and different stadiums, and they take the top players from those clusters, and then we transfer the top players to the final sample. And the final sample has all the top players from all those different clusters that we had before. Now, when talking in terms of bias, this book has many examples. For example, we have an underestimation because of undercoverage. Now, when train scouts like Grady Fuson pick players for the teams, their sample usually includes undercoverage. Why? Because high school baseball players are automatically excluded from that sample. They think it's 1, because of their age, and 2, because they have less experience with the sport. The reason why Billy and Paul use college players is on page 37. The sample size of their relevant statistics was larger, and therefore a more accurate reflection of some underlying reality. Well, as we've learned in Mr. Thronson's class, the bigger sample size you have, the more accurate your results are going to be. This is also known as the law of large numbers, which I defined on your vocab sheet. This transitions us over to chapter 5 in our textbook. Now, when it comes to probability, there's not a lot to go off of, mainly because there's not a lot of equations in Moneyball, but there is one equation that I do want to talk about, which is on your vocab sheet as well. Win percentage equals number of bats allowed over number of bats scored. This equation can be directly compared to the basic probability rule of PA equals number of outcomes corresponding to event A over total number of outcomes in sample space. This equation helps Billy and Paul help predict what games they will win and what players they want to draft onto their team. Although there's not a lot of examples of simulation in the novel, there's definitely some potential for you to do some 4-step processes with baseball players' stats.
What I have discovered from the sabermetrics in Moneyball is that we can connect it to our textbook in chapters 4 and 5. Now, if we jump to chapter 5, there's a huge problem with the probability distribution tables. Managers in the MLB drafting system make consistent errors when they pick an X variable. For example, if they used age for their X variable, that would be an example of bias that we looked at in chapter 4, because you can't judge a person's performance from their age. And so Billy, Paul, and the Oakland A's finally did it. They won 20 of their league games, but lost to a far inferior team, the Minnesota Twins. And so Billy and Paul both proved that they can use sabermetrics and statistics in order to make a perfect team. And now I would like to present you with an homage, a song that sums up everything we just talked about. This is quite honestly the stupidest thing I've ever seen for a final project. Take it away!